And one of the councillors, the local government councillors, put up money and gave us a bike. So that was what was the competition was who could bring the most filled bottles would win this bike. So of course that got the motivation going, and so I taught them how to build these 3 little food outlets for the local women out of the bottles. This was the information board that we put on, just showing them the potential of what actually could be built. And this was the T-shirt that they gifted me. There was a bike with the little bottles, and it says, "With the rubbish we build, the city we clean, and the environment we help. Defenders of the river." And this is how it all started. I was walking down by the river. I've been working there for 10 years, and I came across a spring I'd never found before, this beautiful little spring going into the river. And it had all these lovely stones around it, and somebody had really gone to effort to make it beautiful, this area. And there was no rubbish there at all. And I was like, wow, somebody's caring for this place. And I carried along, and then there were signs up, ecological trail. And there were these signs, don't hurt the animals, don't throw rubbish. And I came across this little house, which had the same signs outside. So I knew, well, whoever lives in this house built that ecological trail. So I went up and I knocked on the door, and out came Don Walter. And I said to him, "Did you make that ecological trail?" And he said, yes. And I really bigged him up for it. And I said, "Well, it's so nice that you're keeping the spring clean and beautiful and there's no rubbish." Yes. And then he looked at me very sad and he said, "But every day I go and I clean the rubbish and I don't know what to do with it because somebody told me it's very bad to burn it. And so now I haven't been burning it and now I don't know what to do." So I told him, "Well, I can give you an example of what to do. You could build a little environment centre here out of it." And his eyes just lit up. And I was going away the next day, so all I could do was just give him some information about what to do. And then I came back the following year, and he'd built this. This was his little, first little eco centre that he'd built out of the plastic, and he'd made the roof and was showing people. So because of his motivation, that here was somebody that really did want to do something, we then went back and worked together on building these 3 restaurants. So he's been running the project down there now. So he was just showing all the different ways of, say, putting the bottles in and rendering it. This was also, I was asked to speak at a conference in Asia, and again, this was some islands off of Bali where they're having real rubbish problems as well. And I went onto this island, and it was absolute paradise, with a ring of plastic all the way around the beach. And there was a school there that desperately needed a new classroom. So the teachers asked me to go up and talk, and in one day, the children collected 380 bottles of rubbish, and the entire island was cleaned up in one day. So it was great to see that something so simple could not only clean this island, it could then create this resource for them to start building their new classroom. So yeah, and they're large bottles, so a huge amount of rubbish that fits into one of these bottles. So you can see all of the kids there all have, and this was the winner. And so we gifted the winner with books. But yeah, it's a really simple idea which, I just encourage people to spread, because it really is a way of closing that cycle, turning rubbish into a resource and making something useful out of it. So this is what the Amazon looks like without all the oil spills. And this is my website, Eyes of Gaia. I've been asked to actually do 2 talks into this one. Dan asked me, would you talk about your work in the Amazon with the practical solutions? And would you also talk about the other talk, which I've been asked to sit on panels, how can one person make a difference? Which is really about the power of our pound and ethical consumerism. For me, it's one thing, I do this work, which just, I didn't think 10 years ago that I'd end up my life's work being in the Amazon, but that's what happened. There was nobody working down there helping these people, and I'm in this, it's bad to fly, I shouldn't be flying there and doing it. But then I'm like, well, there's also a major problem down there, which really needs needs help with, and it's been so great to be able to see that, yeah, one person can make a difference. I could go down there, initiate all these projects which have now been rolling and taken on their own life. But when I'm here, one of the things that I'm really interested in is just our vote with our money. When we're all looking to change the world, obviously it's like this whole transition that we're moving through, and it's like, well, how can one person really make a difference? And I say it's with the pound in your pocket, because it's who do you give that? That's your vote. You know, so it's like it is our energy exchange, and we can either give it to Tesco, or we can give it to the local farmer. And so often what we hear is that, but the farmers' markets, the organic shops, they're expensive. And why we're thinking they're expensive is because we're comparing them to Tesco. We're comparing them with supermarkets, which are, there is no such thing as cheap is good. It cannot be. Cheap can never be good. Because when we question how is it cheap, when you look at Tesco as a great example, you can actually follow them through and see the child slave labour which they're supporting in other countries. That's why they're able to get these products so cheap. Now I know that if I stood outside of Tesco and as the people came out and I said to people, do you believe in child slave labour? Everybody would say no. It's like, by giving Tesco your money though, that's what we're encouraging. And that cycle is continuing. And we would think that there's been an end of slavery. But unfortunately, the supermarkets are the worst. And so I really, really encourage people to really move out of this idea, this thinking that cheap is good. Because if we truly want a just and fair world, we have to pay a fair price for it. And amongst anybody that grows food, you know, we know how much time and how much energy and how much effort it takes to make something. And so then when we look at the pound shop, it's like, how is it possible to actually make something for £1? How much are these people being paid that are making this thing? And we're thinking, oh, I just got something for £1, it's great. And we're not actually following that through. And so that's something for me which I think is really important for us to start addressing this issue of, you know, it's like a lot of people, we don't have a lot of money, especially, you know, in this movement, this environmental movement. And we've got to just move out of this idea of comparison. This is cheap, this is expensive, because we're totally comparing with an unnatural, unfair price, which is being pushed by the supermarkets. So that's like the number one thing that I really, you know, wish to convey to people, is to be really aware with your money and really think of it as your vote. What world do we want? If we want a world free of chemicals, then we do not want to be giving that £1 to buy fairy washing up liquid, which is going to be contaminating our earth. So we can really, as an individual, make a massive amount of difference by just making that commitment to say, right, I want to make my footprint as light as possible. And so therefore, you know, what am I flushing down the drains? What chemicals am I buying? Because I mean, some people say, well, you know, if I buy, you know, a bottle of detergent, it's only a little tiny bit of chemicals that I'm flushing down the drain. But if we look at the bigger picture and we think of their factory and these massive barrels of chemicals that it takes to make these products, and then everybody buying it and everybody flushing it down the drains, we can see the huge amount of contamination that we are causing. So I mean, that's another really simple way that to say, right, to commit to the earth in that just not contaminating it through the use of chemicals, which are found in all laundry detergents, dishwashing liquids, toiletries, and now they're onto this putting biodegradable on it. So we see that and we think, oh, biodegradable, that's good. But what they don't say is if it's biodegradable in a day, a year, 5 years, 10 years, it's this word that's being thrown around now which needs a lot of care because it's not actually natural, it's not going to degrade as quickly as really natural biodegradable washing things. So that's another thing that I really encourage everyone to just, you know, to spread the word on that. 'Cause it's like, how can we make a difference? How can we make a difference is by not contaminating the earth any more than it already is. So taking it into that small, the microcosm and the macrocosm, that how we can make it. Otherwise, we're pointing and saying it's the factories. It's all the corporations and the factories' problem. They're the ones that are contaminating the earth. And we stop thinking, well, what about me? I'm supporting these companies and these factories. So these simple ways that we can commit to really making the world a better place, reducing the contamination, is making a commitment to start using natural products. And don't compare it. It's like, when people say, oh, but, to buy a bottle of Icova compared to a bottle of Fairy, there's, a huge difference in price. But once we move out of that, just don't compare it. People would buy a glass of wine or a pint and wouldn't think about it. Drink it down, it's gone. But they wouldn't pay the same amount for a dishwashing liquid. It's going to last for ages. So, it's moving this method of thinking that we have into, right, I make this commitment for the earth to not contaminate it in any more way. And then going to more of a bigger picture, the power of our money, when we start looking at who do we bank with. There are ethical banks, like the Cooperative Bank, which also supports the post office, which is another thing we desperately need to be supporting, is the post office. And they have this great list, the Cooperative, of who they won't take money from. And every year in their report, they'll tell you how many millions of pounds they've turned down because they won't lend money to anybody that's in the arms trade, that does animal testing, works with GMOs, works with child slave labour. And there's this whole list that they won't support or give any funding to any corporations. So when you see that, it makes you think, well, so what are the other banks doing? And the other banks are funding all this. So for us to withdraw our support, because I'm sure the majority of people in here would not want to support the arms trade, or GMOs, or animal testing, or all of the things which most people are against, but then our money, when it's sitting in a high street bank, that's what it's being used for. That's actually what it's funding. So that's another way that we can really make a difference by saying, actually, I don't want my money being used for that. I'd rather my money in the co-op, which is going into renewable energy technology, it's going into all the good stuff. And also it's supporting the post office, because instead of going into a bank, you have to go into the post office to deal with the account. So co-op bank, fantastic, really great supporter of it. And all of these things are the way that we're withdrawing our energy, we're withdrawing our support and our money from the corporations, which are the ones that unfortunately right now are making a mess of the world, and putting it into the area that we can see will make a positive difference. So there's also good energy companies. And do we look into giving our energy money bill to a good energy company or to the standard energy companies? And this is something that, how easy we can make a difference just by turning off the power. And it's something so easy, but we forget, and somebody told me this shocking fact, and I can't quite believe it's true, that if in America alone they just changed the light bulbs, they could shut down the equivalent of 27 nuclear power stations.